Welcome, students. We are here to start our first topic, culture and development, as you saw in the course outline. By the end of this lesson, I expect you students to be able to explain culture and development as concepts. Show what ways the two exhibit similarities and or differences. Identify and explain elements and characteristics of culture, giving examples from various African communities. Mention the importance of culture to the people of Africa, and discuss factors that bring about changes to African culture. Lastly, I expect you to evaluate from your own point of view what an outmoded customs are. African traditional society has a blueprint of culture which is essentially complete. One in which children learn primarily from their forebears, where rules about accepted behavioral patterns are meticulously taught and transmitted from generation to generation, where law exists but it derives mainly from customs and it is not codified. A traditional economy in African traditional system is subsistence economy in which agriculture is the main occupation. Now, people within the continent have diverse cultures with its own characteristic ways of gathering and preparing food, constructing homes, structuring the family, and promoting standards of right and wrong. It is impossible to understand present cultural practices and social conditions without reference to the society and its cultural practices of yesterday. Therefore, any study of contemporary African society has to take inspiration from what has gone before. How do you define culture? The World Conference on Cultural Policies 1998 defined the concept of culture as that complex whole of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual, and emotional features that characterize a society or social groups. It includes not only arts and letters, but also modes of life, the fundamental rights of the human being, value systems and traditions and their beliefs as well. E.B. Tyler, 1871, a founder of anthropology, defines culture as that complex whole, which includes knowledge, belief, art, law, morals, and language, as well as custom and any capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. Culture is also defined as a social heritage, transmitted from one generation to another. It consists of skills, beliefs, knowledge, and products that are commonly shared by a particular group of people. Culture can be defined also as a society's shared and socially transmitted ideas, values, and perceptions, which are used to make sense of experience and generate behavior and are reflected in that behavior. Now, students, culture is not just only the way you behave, but looking at the definitions from E.B. Tyler and the World Conference on Culture, you could see that culture entails much than what you think. Let's look at the concept. The concept of culture. The understanding of the concept of culture is important given the violence of the concept in private and public discussions. People seem to equate culture and tradition. Meanwhile, culture implies the utilization of tradition or management of what has been handed down from generation to generation. Modern and tradition are often opposed. To modernists, culture is tradition, and tradition is associated with backwardness, the simplistic way of life, small-scale communities, the non-scientific and non-literate society. However, tradition does not have to imply all of this or any of it. What was once and is now labeled as modern will one day become traditional. For there to be a difference, the modern must be seen as innovation, and this is not how modernity ought to be seen, as lacking a past. Culture is also the main factor for human existence, because culture permits people to live together as a society. It is the pattern behavior, and these patterns imply regulations that people in society should live accordingly. Each and every culture has its dignity and value, which must be respected and valued as well. The diversity of cultures in the African continent, their uniqueness and originality, are essential basis for human development of world cultures. Culture can be said to be an artifact. Whatever is said about culture is artifact and humanly made. For instance, the comparison of birthmark and tribal mark. It is clear that people with birthmark are born with them, whilst the tribal mark can have cultural meanings in some societies. Culture never stops to invade nature, as it were, and will still make greater impact with even the advancement of technology. What is material and non-material culture? Material culture consists of tangible parts of culture which include costume, architecture, farm implements, handicrafts, and etc. Whilst non-material culture refers to the symbolic or intangible aspect of our culture, such as folkways, Mores, though spelled M-O-R-E-S, is pronounced M-O-R-A-S, customs, and beliefs. It also includes abstract ideas, religion, family and marriage, as well as music and language, among others. Still under the concept of culture, let's look at what an outmoded culture is. How do you identify some aspect of your culture that you think it is outmoded? Now, some group of people in Africa can be labeled as prejudice and loss of faith in oneself. For these people, any artifact, belief, feeling, or practice that is distinctively African or non-Western is deemed to be misplaced and outmoded. For such people, African marriage practices, extended family system, dress code, systems of reciprocity such as gift giving and foods and cooking, African religion, exhibition of courtesy, African languages, chieftaincy and leadership institutions have no place in the modern society because they are outmoded. There are even those who are ashamed of their dark skins and seek to change their appearance by bleaching. Others sought to dye their hair, change their accent when speaking. These too are outmoded. For some of these people, African studies has no place on the university curriculum or even timetable. It will not be fair to conclude that people's culture is all round positive and free of negative perspectives. The important thing is to assess and identify the negative sides of issues and deal with them, whilst exploiting the beneficial aspect of any cultural institution. There is the need to be careful about the rampant labeling of any practice or norm which is associated with traditional ways as outmoded. Elements of culture. Culture is composed of norms, folkways, mores, laws, sanctions, values, symbols, and language, general idea, religious beliefs, food preferences, music, work habits, taboos, and so on and so forth. Now let's take a look at what these elements are in detail. Let's start with norms. Norms are social and cultural rules that specify appropriate and inappropriate behaviors of a particular group of people in a given situation. It tells us how we must, ought, and should, as well as must not, ought not, and should not behave in many different circumstances within our society. Examples include washing your hands before you eat, respecting your elders, cleaning your compound when you wake up, and other commands like you should not kill, you should not commit adultery, or you shouldn't rape someone. African societies have ways of encouraging and enforcing what they consider appropriate behavior, whilst discouraging and punishing what is considered to be improper behavior. For a norm to be significant, it must be widely shared and understood. Norms are classified into two: folkways and mores. What are folkways? They are customary ways and ordinary conventions which guide people's behavior in everyday life, and their violation call for a ridicle, laughter, or gossip. Example: it is expected of everyone to bath twice a day, wear black clothing to a funeral, wash hands before eating, among others. But if people are not able to oblige to these rules, they are either going to be ridiculed laughed at, or they will be gossiped at. They are not going to be punished severely. So that is folkway for you. The opposite side for folkways are the mores. Mores are norms that must be upheld to ensure the stability and the continuity of the group or society. Hence, their violation draws a strong reaction from the group or society. For instance, one must not involve him or herself in vices such as incest, rape, murder, armed robbery, and the rest. In the case of folkways, if you violate the rules, you are not going to be punished severely. Rather, you'll be ridiculed, you'll be gossiped, or people will, point fingers at you. But the mores is more severe when you offend or you commit such offenses. Because here, people will punish you severely, society will frown on you, and you will be either be taken to law court or in the traditional setup where people will even banish you from the community, or you will be killed. When norms are written down, that is formalized and enforced by a state or special state institution like the judiciary or parliament, then it becomes laws. So we can say that mores leads to what? Norms. It is through mores that we get norms. But the only difference between mores and laws are that both of them, when you commit offense or you do not oblige to those rules, you are going to be punished severely. But the laws, it is when the rules have been written down and it is formalized by a state institution. But for mores, it is just something that we all know. It is a norm that when you are growing up, they try to tell you, do not do this, do not do that. But when it has been written down and formalized by the state institution, then it becomes a law. One of the elements of culture is sanction. Sanctions are penalties and rewards for conduct concerning a cultural norm. The negative sanctions may have embodied in them a personal element, while the positive can be seen as rewards and positive inducements. Sanctions may furthermore be physical or non-physical, verbal or criticism, rebukes or insults. It may be ritual or non-ritual ones, negative or even positive. In African society, conformity to a norm can lead to positive sanctions such as a pat on the shoulder or a word of gratitude, whilst negative sanctions include fines or banishment of offenders from the community. Values are socially and customary shared ideas about what is right, what is desirable, what is correct and good, which members of a society are to uphold. African society think it is desirable to marry, have children, have education, work very hard, and show respect to others. The last element that we want to talk about is language. Language is the foundation of every culture. It has sometimes been described as the soul of a culture and the vehicle of culture. It is a critical element of culture that sets humans apart from other species. Members of a society generally share a common language, which facilitates day-to-day exchanges with others. It includes speech, written characters, numerals, symbols, and expressions of non-verbal communication. Language enables people to influence and control each other's behavior. And I must say that it is through language that we are able to share our culture with other people.